All right. Yay.
Yay! Hi everyone. Welcome to episode
Greetings, greetings.
3 of what is the name of the show again? Oh no.
Oh,
Boss
Boss
LAX
LAX
Direct.
Direct.
Welcome. So today's episode is Kent's Luthors and Perspectives, and we are talking quite a bit about DC, sort of the early days of DC, the later days of DC, the movies, maybe a little bit Zack Snyder, a little bit whoever. Again, just to FYI, DC belongs to who? Do you remember Disney?
Yeah, Warner
Warner's?
Brothers.
We're gonna get
Warner
sued.
Brothers.
Warner Brothers. It's gonna be
Disney?
quite
Yeah,
fun,
Warner Brothers.
and it will be wonderful. Anyway, yeah,
Wow.
here we are, Boss Lax Direct, and it is
Yes.
our third episode. Today is my birthday. I am
Everyone say happy
turning.
birthday to the birthday girl.
No one says anything.
By the way, for those of you who don't know names, since we forgot introductions, the lovely Disdain, whose
Ah,
birthday is today,
that's me.
and the humble
Equally lovely.
Galahad.
Humble
Oh, thank
Galahad.
you.
I don't think. I think you're
Wow!
fine.
Oh my god.
It's wonderful. I believe in the
Okay.
humbleness. Sure. Anyway, it's good. It's good.
Yes.
It's good. It's good to be here
Well,
with
we will be
everyone.
talking to you today about hopefully a topic that isn't copyrighted. So,
Well, so we could spend some time talking about Disney copyright and the fact that copyright laws have been abused, used and abused for many years, and that process has been very interesting. Um, I don't know. Like I personally have very strong feelings about the way that copyright is done in this country and some of the ways that it has been, trouble has been caused. But we don't have to go too deep into it.
well, actually,
I
that's
stopped.
actually been
I
somewhat
stopped the
recent for
stream.
Twitch.
I stopped the stream.
Y-
There's a problem. Hold
Why?
on. Sorry.
Oh,
Yeah, I can. The little light keeps going on. It's really fucking annoying. So
oh,
I'm
that
gonna just
was
adjust. I should have had it adjusted before, but it didn't adjust correctly.
okay.
Sorry. So I stopped the stream, and we're
All
gonna
right,
restart the stream in a bit.
all right.
God damn it! Why is this so hard right now? I guess it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. We're gonna restart. Ready?
Yes,
Three,
we're ready.
2, 1, start. Sorry.
Slight
Connecting.
technical hiccup. We're all
It's
good
connecting. It's
afterwards.
connecting. I
Oh,
think we're back. Um,
probably we're back. Hello. Does everyone see us? If
Things are
anyone's in
broken.
chat, we just had to fix up a few things. We just restarted and we're good.
Yeah. No worries. We're good. So, ooh, okay.
All right. So
Oh,
we were just about to talk about a small amount of copyright, how copyright laws and issues have changed over the years into what people are currently dealing with now, especially how the laws have changed and how the people have reacted and companies have reacted to such things. DCMA is a big giant issue actually, and I was just about to comment over the fact that um, Twitch just recently put out a new set of guidelines. And one of those things is that now, people who use copyrighted music in their streams, things like that, they used to be a little bit of a gray area, and now that's not so much anymore. Oh, thank you, DMCA. Thank you. Thank you, Frequent Beef, for correcting me. Um, and now the issue is that not only had Twitch come in and said you can't use copyrighted music in your streams, period, and a discussion, they actually went through the Twitch channels of almost everybody, and if a video that they had as a VOD was copyrighted music, gone. They just flat out deleted it. So what do you think about that?
so I am a little bit of a believer of like I do agree that artists should get paid for their work, absolutely. I think the concern, and so it's kind of heads back to the whole perspective discussion that is really the point of today's show. um like you have to look at it in a couple of different ways, right? Artists need to get paid. Should artists get paid for the rest of eternity and their subordinates and their children and all of the other business people that work, Disney would say yes, right?
Of course.
I wouldn't necessarily say yes because the other side of that, the other perspective of that is, Disney is using the gross material, so the base material that you're dealing with comes from a lot of different places, right? So like if you think about Snow White and Cinderella and all of these other stories, they have a long history that predates Disney by centuries. So like how do you sit on a side of a conversation as a creative when everybody really understands that creatives take art and take ideas in, and then they churn out their own ideas, and then you have to you can sit on an idea and say this is mine forever, right? So our
Hmm.
copyright laws in the United States used to be, you had 50 years and you could hold on to an idea, a patent, whatever, until that half a century was gone. And then after that, you'd be able to go in and, it then becomes part of the public domain. And so I think it's super important that public domain remains this active and fungible thing because artists are actually looking to that domain to be able to create. So if you say, you can't touch anything at all ever, it means that artists are then forced to start from scratch for every single thing that they do. And that's just not how creatives work. It's not fungible. It's not a place
Hmm.
where new things can be created in an easy fashion. So it stifles creativity. Doesn't really it doesn't really grow that kind of thing. So, I mean, I think people have a lot of different ideas about, if you look at the perspective, right, like one place you look at it, if you're very successful, then it makes
Hmm.
absolute sense. But on the flip side of that, if you look down the road for other people who are coming up behind you, someone saying, you absolutely can't touch my idea, or, this thing that was incredibly popular and has become part of sort of the zeitgeist of the cultural milieu that you have,
Hmm.
you shouldn't be holding it quite so tightly. That's just my
And
opinion.
no, and that makes sense because everything is a sense taking from what is available right now, using it as a catalyst to kind of push maybe an idea forward, or taking something that they saw in a book or movie, TV's music, piece of art, whatever, and extrapolating something from it and then using it to make something more down the road. Uh, and even with streaming right now, it's becoming a big thing about how people just taking like the form of playing a game and using the aspect of interacting with the people who are in chat, and using it to kind of transform what it means to actually play a game and how to be interactive, and using that to create a new piece of art. Just like our current piece of art that needs to be slightly adjusted because I see a bit of the video at the top that the chat is pointing out to us, disdain. It's kind of peeking in.
Oh, the videos at the top
Yeah.
still?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm bad at this, guys. Like, I got it. So, legitimately, I got a new monitor. Are we just gonna mess with it and see what happens? I
Oh, is
got
that
a
was
new
that? Oh, that's
monitor,
why
and
it's so
freaking
big.
monitor is chaos. It drives me absolutely bonkers. All right, hopefully that's better. Yeah, no,
I
it's
yeah,
just
we'll know when it actually moves. Like, oh, there it is. Yep, it fixed.
so hilarious. Fair enough.
But
Thanks.
yes, yeah, you could thank freaking B for that. But
Showing up every time.
yes. But
Um,
yeah, so it's essentially that's the gist of that, and I really, you know, DMCA's is like all around. Well, back even before when we had actually I wouldn't be copyrighted. That's talking about RIA, and I don't want to completely go down this rabbit hole. I see that adjustment, but yeah, yep, is being fixed. But yeah, so that is a thing, and I think people just need to learn to work with creatives more and try to be a little bit more like, we need to firmly establish how fair use play actually works. I think that's kind of the gray area that like no one's really seemed to like kind of figure out, like how do we make fair use without corporations crying foul about all our money's being stolen when in actuality it isn't.
but yeah. So I think it's what's interesting about perspective, in a real way, is like there's two sides to the story, and you can absolutely see the validity of both arguments. And like
Hmm.
I feel very strongly that artists struggle very hard and they spend a lot of time and energy creating something, and once it hits, they should absolutely be paid. Like, I feel super strongly about that. And in fact, to a point where, like, I back in the day, I used to be interesting about paying for things. Now I'm very much about, like, can I support you? Can I, like, put,
Hmm.
my money into what you're doing? And I want to, things like, I spend a lot of money. Simone Leno is an Italian artist that does Tokidoki, and I met him at New York Comic Con, which I have the shirt on today. New York New York Comic Con, a couple years ago, and I absolutely fell in love with his work. And I was very much like, I could go in and be like, I'm just gonna try to put these on, but no, I buy his little toys, I buy his little, whatever it is. Like, I get the reasons why you do it, like why you should pay for an artist's work. They need to eat like
Yes.
everybody else, and it's super important that they are recognized for the hard work that they're doing. I just think that, like anything else, like, there's a circle there, right? Like, if you turn it
Hmm.
around, and this is, when we talk about sort of race, and we'll get into the Kents and Luthors in DC in a bit, but really, art, people didn't really think of comic books as art, really,
Hmm.
until very recently, or rather, I mean, it's always sort of been art, but it's definitely been pop, like more trash than gold.
I
And
mean, not
it was for
wrong.
kids, right? Like,
Yeah.
it didn't need to be Van Gogh, right? It didn't need to be fucking Gauguin. Um,
No. But that was the thing, is it didn't become like a thing until later on when comics resurged from the golden age
right into the
of
Silver
whatever.
Age. Yep,
Yeah, and then
in
they
the
were like, "Oh
'80s.
my god, these things are like worth money," and that's what people were primarily going
Yeah,
after. But
yeah.
then when they rediscovered the actual stories and the art and whatnot, then they're like, "Oh, hey, let's take the concept of this and push it more." Silver Age came out of that, and everything else. So
Right, right. And so it's very it's but
so.
that is the way that really perspective works, right? Like, that's the way that people view things often shifts. And I think that
Hmm.
that's something you want to keep in mind, right? So say you were born in the 50s or 60s, like, like my dad, and he was at the sort of golden age of comics, which is sort of like that 50s to 60s Superman coming in, action. Well, let's think about the history, right? So Superman actually came out, Action Comic 1,
Yep.
in 1933. So that is
Hmm.
87 years ago. We had the
God,
first
so
Superman
long.
comic. Superman was actually the villain in that. So, FYI, if you didn't know, originally, Superman was supposed to be what Lex Luthor is today, right? So he was bald, and he definitely had, like, world domination on the mind. And so that was the original idea from Simon and Schuster, and they put together this wonderful comic. People read it and were like, get that out of here. No one was interested in it. And so that story came back the same year. They rejiggered a few things. They probably like asked their niece, what's hot for the children these days? And the children were like, black hair, black eyes, a strong cape. And no, that's not how it went. I'm
I
sure.
was
I
gonna
don't
say
know.
like,
But it was
I'm surprised he wasn't blonde hair and blue eyes if that was the case.
so this is interesting, right? Like, it is the 30s. There's a lot
Yeah.
more, like, that sort of wholesome Americana kind of feel was a little bit on the way out, right? So that's World War One, in the end of World War One ish, and then kicking off kind of that World War Two feel. Like, it was definitely sort of in the midst of um,
Was it?
a little bit of,
Be-
we can just look at the history, right? It's the internet. Y'all can check it
Yeah,
out
I
for
mean, yeah,
yourselves.
we just. But I was just
But
thinking because you say like the kind of home style Americana was starting to come on its way out, and I'm like, this what the 50s and 60s were completely all about was the suburban American
you would
home,
think so. But the '60s
but it didn't.
was that was civil rights, right? Like that was
Yeah.
really the 50s was very wholesome, quote
Hmm.
unquote, and black people were
Yep.
getting very much harassed. And so like at
Tiny
that
tiny
point
bit.
there were major issues within the United States. So they're um, coming out of the end of World War II was the 40s. So they'd just
Yeah.
gotten out of sort of the Great Depression, end of World War II. World War II starts, end of World War II, the New Deal, and we're sitting
Hmm.
in this situation where you have you have a lot of GIs coming back, and they're sort of like thinking very strongly about
Hmm.
what it means to be American, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
all through that, Action Comics was building, right? So
Hmm.
Action Comics really started in the 30s,
Hmm.
30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and so you have this very strong, like they're going through War Two, and you see Batman and Superman actually, propping up America in the war, and the perspective is particularly, I wouldn't say jingoistic, but certainly very strongly American. Like it's about American, not necessarily imperialism, but certainly like America's face on the world stage, and how do you
Hmm.
explain to children what's happening throughout the world at this time? It's very busy, very like a lot going on everywhere, and
Okay.
so yeah, and so like you see Action Comics really take off. Um, and at the time, it was a busy time, right? So, like that's the 60s. We see a little bit of a drop of readership for comic books after the 60s, 70s, and then the 80s come right back. And the 80s is really sort of the height of
Yeah.
Marvel, where the X-Men kind of burst onto the scene. A lot of these, it's considered the Silver Age, so a lot of things
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
being redone. You're looking at sort of
You
a
probably
go ahead.
you probably had like, I don't think you would have had Crisis on Infinite Earths just yet. But a lot of the staples of like the DC comic book heroes who have already been cemented. So Flash would have been out, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern. I don't think Martian Manhunter was a thing yet.
Yeah.
By that time, like you said, the 80s was rolling around, but the Justice League had been formed, and so you have this entire like golden age
Mhm.
of comics that have survived wartime and have been molded after what has happened after America has kind of like, I
Sure.
guess, settled in
A little bit,
and
yeah.
just move forward. Yeah.
So Crisis on Infinite Earths was 85 to 86. I think it's April 85 to March 86, according to my notes. And they really wanted to do a bit of a reboot. They wanted to abandon the DC multiverse, which was this thing where you had all these different. They wanted to close it all back into one, right? There's a lot of craziness that's been happening. They wanted to get back to one storyline, kind of like what they did with the reboot at the beginning of the century. So about 10 years ago, we had a
Right.
completely new, basically rebooted DC from jump, which is part of the reason why I really like comic books. Is like you'll hear these stories again and again and again, and you'll see it. The artists and the writers are looking at it through new eyes with new perspective, right? They're looking at it. You have this very innocent sort of very America focused thing going on in the
Mhm.
60s. The 80s is much more like corporate corporate rules. Like it's very much like American Psycho nonsense bullshit that we've been talking about from last time. Very
Yeah.
much greed is good ideologies, and then 2000 you have a little bit of a different feel to it. Very much there's here's new science, here's new sci-fi, here's our thoughts about the future, like a very strong feel about it. And so
I love how you skip the 90s entirely as if they didn't happen.
what was going
We
on
don't
in the
want to talk
90s?
about Rob Liefeld and pockets and Lord knows whatever else is going on in the 10-year gap.
All I'm saying, but it really comes in 20-year jumps, right? Like you see these
Hmm.
revampings of like comic base.
Yeah.
Really, it's every 20 years. So it's 60s, 80s, 2000, and now we're probably going to be looking at another like major reboot for a lot of the stories that are out there, a lot of the characters that are out there. But
Which is starting to happen in a way, especially now as comics are moving more into also telling their stories to the general populace through television shows and movies
right.
and
So,
things like that.
mhm. And I think that's what we've really seen is like it's a jump in media too. So that's very interesting, right? Like so you also have the perspective of, we no longer can tell these stories sort of panel by panel. It doesn't necessarily need to the media itself is changing. Like we had television, really in the 80s that sort of how do we tell these stories to kids on TV to how do we tell these stories to adults in a movie theater. It needs to be big. There needs to be more explosions. It needs maybe less dialogue. So almost like did the interest of it go down, right? Like is
Hmm.
are they being made less fungible, less interesting as stories
Less
because of the media?
substantial.
Less substantial. That's exactly the word. I
Hmm.
don't know. I don't know.
Well, then if we take this, so if we take that concept of like how comics have changed based upon the media and the time and their current reflections on modern society,
Hmm.
and bring that to our current topic of all the various versions of Lex Luthor and all the various versions of Clark Kent slash Superman,
Sure.
from how would we interpret that? Because back in, if you go way way back, like you said, Action Comics #1, um, Superman was not the Superman that we've all grown up to. Oh, I shouldn't say grow up to know, but like Superman that was in Man of Steel slash Justice League slash the new iterations of DC Comics is not the same Superman that we started with well back in the 30s and 40s. The two characters are not the same. Not even talking about power wise, talking about like what their, other than their core beliefs, like they probably act very differently. And so did Lex. Lex was a constantly changing character over every 20-year jump, even more so within it, I would argue.
Right.
So,
Absolutely. So I think if you're thinking about Kents and Luthers, what's interesting is the slight differences in the way that the story is constantly told. Like everybody knows that this is a this is a very religious story. So most Superman scholars will admit that Clark Kent slash Kal El is an analogy to Christ's story, right? He was
mhm.
born sent away, not necessarily the most wealthy, just passed on as a child out of wherever he is. Certainly a different kind of story in general. And it can be very interesting to see how that all works, right? So you have, instead of Martha, the original name was Mary for Martha Kent, and then Joseph actually the Joseph shows up in a couple of the characters in the DC canon. So
Mhm.
that is a very basic tenet to this kind of story, right? Clark comes in, he's raised, and he goes out, and then he does great things for the world, and so that is very much like the basis of it.
Mhm.
Whether or not we can say the same about Lex, that's an interesting story, right? Lex is definitely a metaphor for sort of the greed of people, and
Mhm.
the sort of base nature of everybody who is there. We could also kind of point out that he may be a little bit too, he's a analogy to sort of the base evil of individuals. He's willing
Right.
to, he's not innocent. He is not easy to deal with. He has a lot of wealth and power, and that's outside of himself, whereas Clark's energy and power come from inside. I think where the interesting sort of nuances of perspective for Kent and Luthers is the
Okay.
fact that the way that Clark is raised is extremely sort of bucolic and innocent, and that kind of moves all the way through the story. Whereas Luther
That's a
comes
word you're gonna
in.
have to define, by the way.
What's that?
Bu-
Bucolic.
Bucolic. Yeah.
So it
SAT
means
word.
We have them. That's we're here to teach, right?
Yes.
Bucolic, it basically means that you are, you're pastoral, raised on a farm. Like you're very, it's very peaceful, rural, not a
Mm,
lot going on. So basically, not citified, and it's a very typical hero origin. Like you
hmm.
find a lot of stories where someone's raised on a farm, they realize the world is bigger than their farm, and they go out and they're shocked by everything that's happening, and they go and fix it. And so you see that in the hero's journey all of the time. If you look at, a lot of base stories, you look at Luke Skywalker.
I was just about to do a cough, Star Wars cough.
Yeah, it's very typical. Siddharth. If you look at
Yeah.
some of the really old stories, Gilgamesh and Enkidu. If you want to go all the way back to like Sumeria,
Mm.
there's lots of stories where that's the
All
basis.
that exists. Yeah.
But
All
yeah,
right.
so perspective wise, I just think what's interesting. So I will be honest, my favorite character is Lex. I don't. He's wonderful and bald, and he just says what he wants. I particularly enjoyed Smallville, and the incomparable Michael Rosenbaum just played the hell out of that role. Right, very much like owned Lex Luthor, and he was very slick
Hmm.
and daring and very cool. But what's interesting about Lex Luthor from the comic books and from, at the wider world, the world at large, is that
Okay.
Lex has always stated, I think it's in the Quietly All-Star Superman quite a
Was
bit.
that
I
the
think
first time he utters it, or?
he really did sort of nailed. He says very clearly that it is a crime. It is really a terrible thing that the human race depends on a character like Kal-El to save them. There is no reason why we should depend on an alien to fix our problems for us, right? We're humans. Why don't we fix our own damn problems instead of depending on this creature from outer space? We don't know we don't know what his issues are. We don't know why he's doing all of this. Why the hell are we spending a bunch of time yet, listening
Hmm.
to him and doing what he says and letting him save us? And so like that that absolutely like echoed with me quite a bit because I'm one of those people that just feel very strongly about being independent, and not
Right.
depending on outside agents to do what you need to do, right? I don't know, that's just how I feel.
No, that's fine.
But it's a
But
perspective, right? Like it's a perspective that I did not like. I've been reading Superman a long time, and it was just
hmm.
not a perspective I'd ever had about the story. And suddenly, like that was really why that was the thing that kind of got me 100% like, okay,
On
Lex
board.
Luthor, you're not wrong.
I mean, that's always the mark of a compelling villain, an actual good villain, is the fact that they say stuff that actually makes them so they make sense. Is he's still acting like Lex Luthor, he's still acting evil, and he has his own plans and agendas, but he's not wrong. Like that whole statement, like even though
No.
he took that statement and did other things that people don't agree with, the core of his motivations, some of his motivations, boil down to that statement, and that statement is 100% accurate.
It's strange, right? Like so I
Hmm.
think what is also fascinating about Kents and Luthers. So, like if you look at some of the older comic books, you'll see Lex and his father, and their family dynamic. This sort of like very wealthy, context is for kings kind of training, where like it's very much like,
Hmm.
yeah, you need to, the laws are fine, but they don't actually apply to you because you're rich, and we're teaching you how to do that. So like if you look at, that's another interesting sort of perspective of it, right? So
Hmm.
Martha and Jonathan are teaching their kid to control his powers, not hurt
Right.
anybody, keep it all hidden. Like this, there is power within him, right? And if Clark Kent was raised as a Luthor, we would all like the world would be singing a different tune, right? It would be very different expectation. And you see, like, I
Hmm.
think there was oh, what was the name of the comic book? My
Are you
comic
talking
book
about
friends are here. What's that?
Kingdom Come or something like that? You talking about the alternate universe one where what if he didn't have, I want to say if he didn't have his moral standing, but like he always held back. So what the answer to the question of what would happen if he actually like took over like the United States or whatever have you, because no one could literally stop him at all. And he just like, nope, I am the dictator. This is how things are gonna fly, and that's the end of that. Like, there's a whole comic series based upon that. The Justice
Yes.
League even did it an entire like storyline. Justice League America or
Mhm.
Unlimited, the TV show did that also same thing. Like, it's an alternate universe where, and of course the stipulating point is Superman, Clark Kent, Kal-El doesn't kill.
Right.
He's always been raised to like, don't cross that line because you would be no better than the people you are,
Fighting
the
against.
people who do that. And that alternate universe thing is like, what if he did? What if he just said screw it? And I think in every instance of it, he usually I
End up
know
in
the one of
having
them was the
trouble.
Joker who did it, who did something. A lot of it is pointing to Lex. Lex kills somebody, and then Superman just kills Lex, and then is like, okay, well, I crossed that line. Well, I might as well just take over everything.
Superman
And you
is never
see what
going to
happened.
kill Lex.
No,
They
no, he
love each
won't. But
other.
that's what happened.
And they're
It
in
happened.
love.
Is that your like your little play? Is that like your little
My
fan
little
fiction?
no, it is in the comic book. Are you kidding me? They're
What?
dude, bizarre. So Lex Luthor has had two children for Clark Kent twice, Bizarro and Connell. He has had two babies for that man. Okay. You don't decide to mix your DNA with somebody else that you don't love.
Just
Perspective.
as like doesn't know it. Just
Two.
as like two.
I mean, one didn't turn out
Uh,
right. Like Bizarro is a sad case, but Connell is. They're both of their kids. Tell me I'm lying. Go ahead.
Look, Bizarro tries. He does try, and I didn't know that. I thought Bizarro came from some other universe. You telling me that Bizarro was made by Lex Luthor? I'm gonna look this up because I refuse.
Chat. What do you
Bizarro.
know? What? Am I wrong? Am I wrong?
Red Sun, all
Derek will
DC. Well,
know.
let's see. All DC comics, heroes are defined by the villains. They can't get away from them. They can't end them. Other than one of my other friends, Marvel likes to mix their heroes and villains a bit more. Uh, yeah, no one's mentioning it.
I mean, it's the. Everyone gets mad when I
Oh,
say that.
wait, the latter Bizarro was created by Lex Luthor, who used the duplicating ray on the adult Superman and hoped to have the duplicate attack. What the
Okay.
fudge?
So we know Connell is a mix of their DNA. We do know that. That is
Con L C O
Con.
N
Yeah.
A
So
O.
Superboy.
Okay. Yeah, that one
Have a
I'm
baby for
fine.
somebody.
We'll let that one go. Chat is mostly talking about I think X-Men just showed back up in the chat again.
I
X-Men
mean,
is
I get it.
basically a
Like,
revolving door about which side of their spandex they're on. But yes, so I get it. Okay, so
oh
yeah,
boy.
Superboy was always a clone, right? He was a clone of Superman.
And like, no, he was not. He was a Diplo. He had both Luthor DNA and Kent DNA. That's that's canon.
What?
Am I wrong? You guys can tell me if I'm wrong. I read a lot of fan fiction, and sometimes it gets muxed up. But I'm pretty sure that
Oh,
that was canon
that was 1993, and modernized Superboy, a teenage clone, ostensibly a Superman, but also including human DNA.
of Lex
Eventually,
Luthor.
Superboy does not say.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
it does not say. It does. It just says he's a clone. It just says he's a clone.
It is. It is. It is. All right.
What? What?
If you guys can prove me wrong, I will take it back. But as of right
Look.
now,
Yeah, there is. Do, 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 do.
There's a lot of
No.
reading. No?
There's a 1994 storyline that does not say.
It
For some reason, it
is.
skips over, like, it goes to 1991 and then jumps. Oh, wait. There it is. 1993. There we go. Do.
We're gonna let Galahad
Originated
read.
from. There it is. Although his genes originated from the human DNA of Paul Westfield, the director of the government sector known as Project Chemist had created the kid. Yeah. So it is not of Lex Luthor.
What? No
Oh,
way.
crap. Yep. I was like, there's no way.
Hmm.
I know Cadmus did that
Hmm.
nonsense, but, like, there's no way Lex, that would, like, wouldn't that go
I'm
against
gonna
everything
look.
Lex stood for?
Yes, no, no, no. It is there. I will. So let's go. I have it on. Here it is. So
Uh,
according
uh,
to.
oh, there it is. It is revealed via email sent to Robin that Superboy's human DNA is not from Paul Westfield, but from Superman's foe, Lex Luthor. It is another version of Superboy, I think, that has it. There's two Wikipedia entries that have Superboy, and the one I pulled was the older one. Like, it's Superboy, just the general term Superboy, but the Superboy that's Con-El is
Connell,
the
that's
one
what's
that, yeah, that Superboy has Lex's DNA. It starts off by saying that it's Paul Westfield,
hmm
and then it's
I mean,
later
Lex is not
revealed.
gonna. Not gonna admit that immediately.
Really?
No. He's
You would
not.
think he would lord over that.
All I'm saying is, you don't have
Mm.
children for people you don't love. Just straight up.
It is he has a love for Superman. Sure,
Well, I mean,
we
so
can go with that.
perspective, right? Like you guys see it as whatever, but what I mean, love at the end of the day is what? Just trying to find a good parent for your kids. In,
Oh,
in the in the short
the
in the
parents that
short
fight. I want to point out
in the long.
routinely fight on a regular basis.
I mean,
Take over the
it's.
United
I feel
States.
like that's just pulling pigtails. Okay, like it's fine. It's fine. It's not
Routinely.
that.
Well, actually, there are times where they team up.
It's not
So,
that
like, okay,
serious. Dude, I mean,
it's
every
never.
time Lex Luthor like wants to blow up the planet, Superman comes and says no, 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 and he's like, "Fine, let's do." I mean, what do you?
I
But
was like,
what do
honey,
you
could
do?
you stop? Could you just
No,
turn
we're not. So again, perspective, right? Like this is you look at a thing, you look at the information that you're given, right?
Go on.
And this is not a like nobody else except girls who are like do it.
So wait. Where does Lois Lane fit in this?
I mean, half the time he can't stand her. Like just legitimately, who can stand Lois Lane? All right, fine. Lois Lane is a wonderful person, and I'm sure I'm pissing off all of the Lois Lane fans out there. She's
Those who are
fine.
watching this.
She is fine. Okay, she's a wonderful person. I love Terry Hatcher. It was great. Right, Lois Lane, wonderful.
Thank you.
But you don't have children. You see Lois Lane having any children for Superman? No. No.
We're not gonna get into why the internet thinks that's a bad idea.
What that? Oh, okay. Forget. That's just whatever.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
sure anything that needs well, exactly. Who else? You're gonna need a billionaire genius to deal with it. You're gonna have
Oh
babies.
yes, only Lex. Only Lex is the one person in
handle
the
it.
universe capable of having Superman's child twice.
Twice. Right. So back again to
Anyway,
back again to perspective. Yeah. So the thing about it is, you're sitting in a situation where we're spending a lot of time just sort of describing, why perspective is so important. Like once you open up a little bit of a can of worms, like it's very easy to see the difference, the differences in view that people may have. So you have an inciting incident like, here's a superhero that came out of a test tube. Wonder who their parents are or why. Certain people are going to decide, well, that's fine. We have some superior DNA. Let's put it in there. Let's see who we get, right? Some people are going to be like, They love each other. But again, perspective. I think
Right.
where it turns important is um, there is quite a bit to be said about how these stories are viewed by different audiences that are reading them, right? Like,
Right. Right.
the reason why I'm very much like, Superman and Lex Luthor is because a lot of this material that is being made into movies, being made into culture, basically, it really wasn't written for women. It wasn't really written for folks with a little bit of an alternate view. And
Mm-hmm.
then the stuff that is kind of written for us is very much under the surface. So, we talked a lot about Kent and Luthor's today and DC in particular, and the fact that a lot of where it was built, how it was built, and where it was built from, kind of came from a little, just sort of Americana in a real way, and propping up sort of American idealism.
Mm-hmm.
But that, if you look at the 60s, there were two very different Americas happening at that time, right? You had a very sort of African American struggle, and you
Right.
had, this sort of American polis fighting very hard against that. And so in the actual comic books in the 60s, you'll see, Superman, trying to be very nice to communities of color, but at the same time, not really, like, there was very little to present at the time to black kids. And so, we're reading Superman, and we're seeing him, help the police. Whereas the black
Mm-hmm.
community at the time did not, in the 60s all the way to today, felt very
Yeah.
differently about the way that police handled both
Oh
police handled
yeah.
things.
Definitely.
And so you end up, like, I think that's why perspective is so important, and why writers should be spending the time kind of looking at the way other people might be viewing their stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, we I have, like, very out there, very honest. Like, I've always, like, kind of sided on the Law and Order side of things until I kind of grew a bit older and really heard a lot of this stuff, and, like,
Yeah.
heard from other people what their experience have been with, sort of the Law and Order side of things. And so I had to kind of step back, and, even, I've always been aware, but it never really hit home until, some of these stories came from friends of mine, and I was like, oh no, this is a problem. Or rather, like, I had to look at a few different
Mm-hmm.
perspectives before I really felt comfortable coming down on a side. And I think that's also really important for people to do, is, like, you look at the perspectives. You look at, as creators, as creatives, you look at the different perspectives that people may have. As consumers, we also look at where the material is coming from, and really understanding, like, what the person means by the things that they say.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
I guess some of that was played up a bit. So like when they had the Death of Superman comic, um, and there was the big shindig goes against um why can't I remember the villain's name? But essentially he ends up fighting and dies.
Dark
And
Seed.
no, not
No, Dark
Darkseid.
Seed. Death of Superman.
Doomsday.
Okay. Yes, you're right.
Thank you. Um, but when he fights Doomsday and he beats Doomsday, but he dies. Four different Superman came up out of that. And one of them was Steel,
Right.
and Steel was I think a black guy from Chicago, and he just wore like a metal outfit, like you can almost say it's Iron Man esque. Um, I don't think it had the ability to fly, or maybe it did, but he also had like that giant steel hammer or whatnot. I forget. There's an aesthetic they were kind of going for with that. But just the fact that it was a black dude who was taking up the mantle, and each of the four different Superman that came up had a different aspect of Superman that they chose to embody. And I think the one that Steel took over was the whole like protecting protecting people who couldn't protect
From
themselves
themselves.
type of thing, and that's the one that they took. Um, it was very interesting to see a black man take that role.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that kind of shows like what they were taking from Superman. If they had the power and capability to be him, what would they do? And I think he was still very much about his community, his thing, more so than like the police or
Yeah.
the general populace as a whole. But it was very it was a very unique take on that, and I think they were kind of bold to do that then. Of course, me as a kid didn't know any better. I didn't pay attention to the fact that he was just black. It was just some dude dressed up as Superman in freaking steel outfit and carried a hammer. Um, Later on, I got a little bit more of the nuance, and you can actually see that because of the four Superman that came from that, which they all eventually got rid of because comics just have to bring the original back. Steel was the only one of the few, I think, one and maybe one other one actually got a continuation. Their story continued, or they kept bringing that character back. So there's something to be said for people who saw what they were trying to do. And again, this is '90s. Um, who saw what they were trying to do, and then of the Superman, I think the fan populace was like, "We want Steel." And hopefully it was
Yeah.
because of things more than just he was just like a different take. Like I would hope that it was because he was showing a different perspective, like a black man being a hero who took what he saw from this kind of Christ allegory character, embodying it and then doing his own thing from that. So
Right.
much so that it continued to evolve and became a whole other character entirely. I There's recognition later. I don't recall if Superman and Steel ever actually end up meeting up and then saying, like, hey, good job or whatever. But it is the thing that happened.
Yeah. So I think I after Infinite Crisis, I was so shell shocked. I was like, I can't do more. I can't get through any more of this. So I will pick up Steel and run through that comic book. I think it was pretty cool. I think at the time I'd moved on to Black Panther and Luke Cage.
Hmm.
And so that was like I was trying to pick up a lot of the '70s stuff that had been generated at the time, kind of for Black folks.
Oh, okay, that's
But
good.
yeah, I mean, perspective wise, I'm always pretty fascinated by the different sort of takes on the Superman story, because it's sort of an allegory to this sort of very Christian, religious
Hmm.
conversation, and watching people sort of take that and make it relevant to their life today, like the kind of story they want to tell about, what is goodness and what you do if you have all of the power. So I think what's also interesting about Superman, maybe Superman's power set in particular, and what makes writers kind of want to
Hmm.
write him, is the idea that he has everything, right? He has all of the power to make change, and yet there are situations that he cannot help. And I think that that's always an incredibly interesting place to start, right? You have
Hmm.
all of the power to do all of these things, and yet there's still people you can't save, people who don't want to be saved, people who don't want your help. They straight up, and it is a conversation with people, right? So I think
Hmm.
what's always interesting about Superman is his, how does he deal with the very human element that he's kind of in this milieu he's in the mix of, right? And he's always trying
Right.
to understand humans and be human and live a human life, and yet like he's still sort of pushed to rescue us and savior us. And so personally, like, being
Uh oh. Uh oh.
being the villainess that I am, um,
Sorceress.
being the sorceress that I am, it's always entertaining to me to watch him get a comeuppance. Like I'm always like, get him. Especially with people with no powers, like like so magic. I'm sort of like, I mean, fine, but if you can best Superman with your brain alone, you
Yeah.
win. You get the crown, right? It's just like that's always it's always incredibly enjoyable to me when he gets comeuppance. And so that's, I think, like looking at that through sort of this view of what is it that
Mhm.
makes an interesting Superman story, right? Um, I find it sometimes hard to deal with the cases where he's just there doing his thing and people,
Mhm.
people are just worshiping him with no like real thought about why, like
Why he does the things he
why he does
does.
the things he does. Um, so
If
I don't
I
know.
may interject,
Sure.
one of the ones that is an interesting thing to look at in that perspective, and this resonated for me for like years once I saw it, and was in Justice League of America, the Joe Justice League, the show, was when they introduced now Shazam, but Captain Marvel.
Yeah, yeah, Captain Marvel's
And
it's
I
fun.
cared not about them do because there's always the thing of like, can Captain Marvel be Superman? Because they're essentially the same power set.
Sure.
I was like, I did not care at all. But you have a person, Superman, who had grew up, had the youthful persona, had the ideology and whatnot. Now he's the adult. He knows how the world works, so he thinks he knows how the world works, and he now has become the oh, we know these people are bad, or we know that they can't be redeemed, or I always have to do this and that, and I always have to look out for everybody because I'm the person who can handle all that. And then you have Captain Marvel, who looks like that, but is this teenage kid
Yeah.
with all this power, and he's just trying to do good. And it was this one scene in there where they have the Justice Society meetings. There's all like this core 7 members, and he, like Captain Marvel had just joined. He had this big kind of reveal, and then eventually it was a thing with Lex. It was actually an episode about Lex, where he builds a playground, um, or something for the kids, but underneath it was some timer. I think it actually was a bomb. So like eventually these two duke it out, and Superman goes in, pulls out the bomb, and obviously it's something that was underneath it.
Or
But the
Lex.
whole point, yeah, Lex didn't care about anything related to that park at all. He didn't care about whatever. He literally just did this to get these two to fight.
I mean, you
And
got
I
to tell
don't,
you look. If your boyfriend
huh?
decide he does, you put your boyfriend
In
in
his place.
connectivity with
Yep.
whoever. Sometimes you just want to, he didn't leave the seat down when he went, and he just decided Shazam's gonna take care of that today. That's what's gonna
This
happen. We're,
is
we're
my
teach
punishment
you
to
a
you.
lesson. I
But
mean,
yeah,
how do you discipline Superman?
ex-
Right?
yeah. And this was the thing where like even though it was a fight, even though it led to like an actual physical altercation, the words at the end of that thing was what hit him, and it was the fact that Captain Marvel came in. It was essentially like, I come from a place where we always give people the benefit of the doubt, even if this the villain, even if I get played, I still take them at face value because that's how we are and that's how I was raised. That's
Sure.
how it should be. And if you think about what they were trying to do, we talk about how Superman and all that from Action Comics like is the birth of like the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, or whatever have you. If you go back and look at Shazam's or Captain Marvel's like setting,
Right.
not like
Like,
now he's in the movies or whatnot, but back then it's still that same ideological like 50s suburban
mm-hmm.
life, and
Interesting.
he's fighting enemies on the up and up. Like he does all that, and he's still like, oh, I'm going to go kill this person, and you better depower yourself or whatever have you, otherwise I'll kill them. And he does it, and
Yeah.
he's like,
He's a
and
kid.
he still turns that around, but he does not forsake what being a good person is. And when he saw Superman was willing to do that, just because he assumed that Lex was always doing something bad, Captain Marvel's just like, screw this, I'm out,
Yeah.
because you've forgotten what it was like to be a hero.
Yeah. And Yes. And so that's an interesting like perspective too, right? Like is it an internal
Mm-hmm.
thing? Is it what you do? Like there's a lot of differences in opinion about and we can we can dip into philosophy in our last 5 minutes. But that's
Yes.
we if we're going to talk about sort of deontology and value ethics, and we can get into there, but we're not going to do that in 5 minutes.
No,
That's a
no, we're
course.
not. No, no, that's
um,
the end of that.
but yeah, no, it really makes a lot of sense, right? Like, so if you're looking at, what you do versus what you think and hope and are and what your intentions were,
Hmm.
those are two different things that you can make a value judgment upon. And so it becomes hard when you're trying to compare the two. Like, what did you actually think would happen versus what did happen. And those are
Hmm.
also fascinating stories as well. Like, Superman misses the train, or Superman, ends up, whatever, something he does ends up killing people.
Oh yeah.
They're all it's just very fascinating sets of stories with a lot of different perspectives that you can kind of, a lot of different lenses you can view them through. Um, Very cool. All right.
Yeah. We have
5
5 minutes.
minutes. So we try to do this maybe every time. What are you watching? What are you reading? What are you playing?
Oh wow. I'll say for this time I'm playing Dragon Ball Fighters.
Okay,
Getting back into the my fighting games and actually relearning some combos. What am I reading? Ironically, it is not a storybook. It is the Shadowrun book that I'm
cool.
running a game for. So I have to go read up on settings for London and um, just in general, like all the stuff relating to Megacorps and things like that. As to what I am watching right now, it's not currently anything. I don't have anything on my plate, even though I should have Lovecraft
Oh,
Country on there. But I mentioned that last time, so I didn't want to bring it up again.
I mean, if you're still watching it, the ending
Yeah.
was on fire. I'm not gonna tell you anything more than that, but I enjoyed it. It was
All right.
pretty good. What am I watching? So right now it's Star Trek. Yeah, Star Trek. That's all I'm watching. That's all I'm doing. It's only Star Trek. Yeah, so watching that. I am currently still playing No Man's Sky. I
Mm-hmm.
actually downloaded a game called Raji, which is based in, I think it's northern India. It's very very cool, beautiful graphics. I'm very excited about it. It's a
Mm-hmm.
fighting sort of Diablo style fighting
Oh,
game.
okay.
Yeah, I'm
Mm-hmm.
very excited, and it's a female main character. Definitely
Sorry, I need
going
to
to
write this down. What was the name of it again?
Raji. So it's a
R O.
Raji.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
so
will
look it
find
up.
this game.
And I think the name of the company, do 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 do,
Ooh.
Raji, an ancient epic, and it is on Switch and Xbox and all kinds of places. And
Ooh.
the developer is Notting Head Games, and the publisher is Super.com. It's
It looks
beautiful.
beautiful. Yeah, it
Very excited
does.
about it.
All right,
Um,
that's being saved.
cool, cool. Yeah.
And what are you
Um,
reading?
what am I reading? Oh, so many things. So I just got done with kind of a little bit trash right now, to be very honest. Like, sometimes I just need something in front of my face to read. That it's not, it's just not that serious. But there's a couple things. So I did pick up Radiance by Kat Valente. I often, she's put that out a few years now, but I'm taking it slow because it's kind of a thick read. Like, it's very
Mm-hmm.
it's very like dense to get through. It's this sort of like almost Art Deco feel to it, like the age of cinema except in space.
Right.
Really fun. She's just such a great writer. And I'm
Um,
also go ahead.
Chad is asking you which Star Trek, by the way.
Which Discovery. Come now. I mean,
Why would it be anything else?
yeah, just right now it's Discovery, and yeah, it just Michael Burnham. So, my brother is here, and he has seen both of the episodes that are currently out. I'm gonna watch the second one probably today, maybe tomorrow night. I'm also taking care of the kiddos, but it's a good time. Yeah, it's been
So,
busy. Lots of good
you
stuff out
have.
there to read and to watch and to play. So definitely chat. You should also place what you are doing and playing and reading in chat. Let us know. Share with your friends. Share with us, especially if you have recommendations, and we will take those and check them out.
Yes, please do. Thank you, chat, for sitting down, watching, and listening with us, and providing us with colorful commentary. We appreciate it.
Sure.
Please come
Uh,
back and visit us next week.
yeah, absolutely. Bye, guys.
Bye bye. This is us signing off.
Signing off.